Hey, good morning, y'all. My name is Jonathan. I'm the assistant law librarian here, and this is Family Law 102, our Pro Se Basics course. And let me go ahead and share my screen here on the PowerPoint, and we'll get started. All right. This is Family Law 102. It's kind of a continuation of Family Law 101, which was last week. And these Pro Se Basics courses are kind of on a rotating basis, about once every 8 weeks or so. I think we have 7 total classes. We have research. We have Courthouse 101, which talks about being involved in cases at the courthouse in a general sense. And we have 2 family law cases courses, and we have a estate and probate class as well. So Family Law 102 is designed to kind of go a little deeper into the various family law types of cases that you might become involved in and make you aware of them first of all, and then we'll kind of go from there. I've only got about 40 minutes. Usually these classes, we usually give about an hour presentation, but on our current Zoom account, we're limited to 40 minutes. We're in the process of signing up for a paid Zoom account through the library system, and that'll allow us to have courses of really any length. So I'm going to kind of go through it, not quickly, but just a little more briskly than I normally would, kind of skipping over some things, because there is some overlap between this course and Family Law 101. Just naturally, there's going to be some overlap between some of the topics we discuss. And of course, I'm going to email each of y'all the PowerPoint, and I'll give you my email address if for some reason you don't happen to get it. Let me just go ahead and do that right now, and I'll scroll down to the next slide here. My phone number is 281-341-3718, and my email address is there, jonathan.briggs@fortbend.lib.tx.us. So feel free anytime to give me a call or shoot me an email if you need something from us. We're glad to help anytime. We're, as law librarians and our staff here, we can't give legal advice. What we do seek to do is provide as much information and resources for people to address their legal needs. We have basically sort of 2 folks who come to the law library. We have attorneys, and we have what we call pro se litigants. And pro se simply means you're representing yourself. And it's actually about half and half. The law library was established about 30 years ago pursuant to state law, and our law library is well funded. Fort Bend does a really good job with us, giving us the materials we need to assist people. So it's not a big library, but it packs a lot of punch, in what we have in our books and online resources are really excellent. And obviously we're kind of in a weird situation. That's why we're doing these things via Zoom instead of in person. Given what's going on with the coronavirus issue, we've had to transition in how we do some things. And our law library is currently partly open or partly closed, however you want to look at it. We can't admit attorneys and county staff. We're working on a reopening process for the whole library system as far as the general public, but that's being in the works. It doesn't mean we can't help you. We can, like I said, we can help via email, we can help via phone. And if you come to the law library, if you come to the Justice Center here, if you're out in the hallway, we'll come out in the hallway and help you and help you as best we can in that situation. So in the Family Law 102, like I said, is to give more detail about some particular legal processes that are encompassed by the family law district courts. I'm going to scroll through kind of some of the general slides. They're still informative, but they're pretty general as well. Family law is a part of civil law as opposed to criminal law, and divorces and family law matters are a significant part of what brings people to the law library and to this courthouse. There's 3 family law courts, but they're served by 6 judges, because each elected judge also has an associate judge assisting them with their docket. and those associate judges can basically do almost anything that the regular judge can do. And so it's a recognition of the fact of how busy these dockets are to have 6 full-time judges handling those things. And each court obviously has a website. Everybody has a website now, of course, and it's really a good source of information. Let me go back to that slide. Each court has a web page, and when you're involved in a court, you'll be assigned to one of those 3 family law courts, and knowing their procedures and how they do things is very important in helping you navigate your case through there. And so I totally recommend everybody go to their court's website and become familiar with their procedures and processes and so forth. It'll help you quite a bit. And so this link here on slide 9 tells you how to get to each district court's webpage. There's also a court, in addition to the 3 family law courts, there's a court specifically set aside for child support cases brought by the Attorney General's office. So that meets, I'm not sure if it meets weekly, it usually is in the jury assembly room. And so that's also something that goes on here. The Attorney General's office has an interest in children of the state being supported by both parents, including the parent they don't live with, and they'll seek to enforce that. I said just kind of talking about COVID-19 protocols. Obviously, the courts have been impacted by this. There's been a lot of delays and limitation on what the courts have been doing. It's all different courts, and they've had to set up different procedures and how to do things. Some hearings are being held by Zoom. Some things are now being done solely on like affidavits instead of their necessity of a hearing. The questions and testimony that would have been covered in a hearing can now sometimes be done via affidavits, such as in a divorce, an agreed divorce. If both parties submit the appropriate paperwork and affidavits in support of that paperwork, then it can be accomplished that way. So again, it ties in with the court's information, knowing what their processes are and how they're doing things under this current circumstance. I think each court obviously is allowing for in-person hearings, depending on the nature of the case. Sometimes, the courts have to go on no matter what's happening, and there's certain things that have to be addressed by the court in person, and they'll make provision for that. Obviously trying to do the social distancing and mask and everything like that. Obviously there's a health screening to come into the law library or come into the courthouse, taking your temperature and so forth. So like I said, things are kind of in flux as how things are being handled here at the Justice Center. Just it pays to, look on the various websites and avail yourself of that information so that you can still get your case through the system in some manner. And hopefully, like I said, getting the law library reopened and all the other ones, there's a committee, I think, working on, all the protocols that need to be put in place to have the general public coming into all the various law libraries, the law library and the other libraries. So let's kind of get on with the substance of the course. As I talk about invariably in any course I teach, and it's a good axiom to follow no matter what, is you got to react to things, and you got to be proactive and reactive. If you're involved in a case and papers are coming in, you've got to respond in some way. You've got to look at those papers and determine how to appropriately respond, because if you ignore things, that's when bad things tend to happen. So you got to stay on top of it. I know it's unpleasant. Nobody likes to have to really deal with this kind of stuff. But it's obviously very important, especially in the family law context, because failure to take care of business can result in some negative things. Default divorces granted against you, a change in your family situation, be it custody or support, visitation, things like that. So you got to bite the bullet and go forward, and we're here to try and assist you in doing that. There's some basic issues. Why would you be in the courts in Fort Bend County? There's jurisdiction and venue, terms you might have heard of, and what they mean is essentially jurisdiction is the power for a court to hear a case. And so the jurisdiction for family law cases, it's conferred upon the family district courts here in Fort Bend County, and to have a state court such as those handle your case, you have to have lived in the state for a certain period of time, or one or more of the parties has to have lived here in Texas for the Texas to have an interest in your family situation. You know, if you're from Oklahoma and you've lived here a week, you know, the courts aren't going to hear your case yet. So there's a time frame about being a resident of Texas. And then jurisdiction is also conferred upon the courts by getting jurisdiction over the actual person. And that ties in with the service of legal process on people. So, you know, they have the power to hear the case. Now do they have the power to hear the case over a particular person? And that's where service of lawsuit papers and so forth comes into play, which I'll be talking about in the next slide. Venue is then the other issue. What county within Texas would it be appropriate for you to file in? Generally, it's regards to where someone lives again. At least one of the parties has to have lived in the county where the divorce is filed for a certain period of time. I think it's 90 days. So say if you separate from your spouse, one of y'all is living in Wharton County and one of y'all is living in Fort Bend County, venue would be probably in either one of those. It just determines on who's going to file first. Obviously, there's venue issues related to other types of family law cases and so forth, things involving children and such. And so those things are contained in the family code, and we have the family code here at the law library in many forms. Service, like I said, getting someone in suit is a key issue. It's about due process. It's about someone having proper notice of what's going on. Hold on one second. So it's about you know, getting someone properly in the case out of fairness towards them. You know, you can't really want to rule on someone's divorce until they've been properly brought into the case. So, and typically, you know, it's done through in-person service of somebody. You know, you file your petition and then you do a, can you please mute? Let's see. I'm going to go ahead and mute folks here. Thank you. So, like I said, there's different ways of accomplishing service. The traditional ways are by in-person service, certified mail for individuals. Sometimes if you're suing a corporation, say in some other kind of civil case, you have to serve their agent for service of process or serve them through the Secretary of State of Texas. So those are the normal ways, or not the normal ways, the most traditional ways. But the courts recognize, and the state Texas recognizes that sometimes people are hard to find. Maybe they don't want to be found. Maybe you don't know where they live anymore. It's not going to keep you from getting divorced, let's say, but you're going to have to go through additional steps to do so. Say if somebody doesn't, you know where they live, they never want to answer the door. The deputy goes up there, knocks on the door, nobody ever answers. Well, that's not going to keep them from getting sued in the divorce case. They'll just have to arrange for what's called substituted service, where they can end up leaving the paperwork at that home, say on the front doorstep. There's service by posting or publication. Again, if you can't find the person, you've made a diligent effort to do so. Upon a proper showing to the court, you can serve them, or service can be accomplished by posting, which is essentially putting their suit papers on a bulletin board in the courthouse lobby. It's now done on a digital bulletin board, I think. But and then there's service by publication, which usually comes into play when there are children involved. And so an ad has to be put essentially in the classifieds of the newspaper. So then there's waiver of service. A lot of times now, since divorces are agreed, at least in some respects, the two parties are agreed that they want to get divorced, and to save drama and the expense of having service accomplished, you can do what's called a waiver of service. You can provide a copy of the petition to your spouse, and along with a waiver of service form, if they execute that form in the appropriate manner and return it to the court, that then gets them, they've been served. Or waives service. And so now it's about getting both parties before the court, so the court has power to rule on your case. And it's a key issue in any lawsuit. It's very important. So what comes into play here? The law that you're going to be dealing with in family law cases. There's the family code, which is state statutes. It's very extensive, covers a lot of different materials, and that's probably your starting point for learning the law about family law. There's the rules of civil procedure that govern all types of civil cases, and those are going to come into play. There's a whole lot of them, and it's about how cases are handled in courts and what are the proper procedures to do things. And there's a lot of detail in there, and there's sort of devils in the details. And if you're going to handle your own case, you got to get familiar with them to at least some extent. And so we have those available as well. There's the rules of evidence. How are you going to get your evidence before the court and able to survive a possible challenge to that evidence? You say, I want to get photographs of something that's important to the case for the court, for the judge or the jury, if it's a jury trial, to consider. It's a relatively simple process for getting photographs admitted, but you also got to be prepared for objections. There's other records that you might need to get admitted into evidence. How do you do that? It's a very key issue that a lot of normal folks aren't going to really be aware of, and it could be a hiccup for them. Something lawyers deal with all the time. How do you get your evidence into the record, whether it's medical records or photographs or text messages or something like that? So it's another area that people need to be aware of, because as a normal person, I had a law professor would always say, you don't know what you don't know. And so if you're a pro se person representing yourself, you're kind of starting at zero oftentimes. It's not out of ignorance. It's just, why would you know this stuff until you're directly involved in it? And now there's a whole lot you need to be aware of. Some things, like I said, can be relatively straightforward, agree divorces and such. The main thing you got to do on that is to be careful in how you do things. But if you do have to get involved in a little more contentious type of process, a lot of this stuff is going to come into play. Civil Practice and Remedies Code is kind of an adjunct to the rules of civil procedure. It covers a lot of different areas, things such as venue and jurisdiction, damages. Those things are governed by the Civil Practice and Remedies Code. We have that available as well. And it's not necessarily last, but definitely not least, Texas case law. Cases go through the system, get appealed to higher courts, the courts of appeals or the Texas Supreme Court, and they interpret law and lay down rules in regards to the family law. So it's important to know that. Say like one particular issue that we're going to talk about, termination of parental rights. The courts, the family code, discusses termination of parental rights. But the case law sort of puts the meat on the bones for what factors are going to be considered in doing that. So it's kind of works in conjunction. You got some, sort of the straight law and the family code, but then you have the upper courts adding to that, and they can be very important to your case. The overarching principle in family law cases is called the best interest of the child. It's contained in the family code and is always the primary consideration when issues such as conservatorship, possession and access to the child. Conservatorship means custody. Possession and access is essentially visitation. So the best interest of the child is going to predominate, and it's what the court essentially has to follow. Just kind of goes back to sort of taking care of business on things. So say if you are doing an agreed divorce or something like that, whatever it happens to be, always be careful when you're signing things. Make sure you have read them. Make sure you understand them. And before you sign them, make sure you agree with what you're signing, or you abide by what you're signing, because once you do, once that's been entered by the court, it is hard to undo it. Sometimes things can be undone, but you don't want to have to rely on that. Also, some things people want to rely on representations by maybe their ex-spouse to be, but they don't get it in writing, and then you're screwed, essentially. We've had some people come in here, they got divorced, maybe they had an agreed decree, and not included in that decree was important issues, and they said, well, he promised me he was going to do this, or he was going to let me stay in the house until so-and-so, and it wasn't in writing, and it's not a lot people can do about that. So get it in writing and be careful. Simple as that. Like I said, there's many different types of family law cases. Most people are most familiar with divorces, be they a divorce with children or not, be they an agreed divorce or more, you know, what's called a default divorce or an arm's length divorce. And then there's a lot of other types of cases, often really in the aftermath of a divorce. The courts maintain jurisdiction over cases, especially ones involving children, and you know, people oftentimes have to come back, and we'll get into that a little bit. But so let's talk about some of the different family law cases. There's divorce, there's paternity, there's termination of parental rights, there's adoption, which can tie in with termination, modification of family law orders, original suits affecting parent-child relationships, motions to enforce family law orders, motions for contempt, which can kind of tie in usually with motions to enforce. There's annulments, there's name changes, and we have information and forms for all of these things. Divorce is obviously one of the big ticket items, and a lot of times the cases in family law courts flow from there. And I have several slides here kind of talking about the different types of divorce, whether it's kind of agreed or not. You know, it's about getting the paperwork on file, getting the other parties served, setting up hearings with the court, things of that nature. Each court, like I said, on each court's website, there is what's called the pro se pleadings checklist. Definitely make sure you're aware of that as to what each court requires, say in the instance of an agreed divorce. Then there's divorces where it's not necessarily agreed. And the terminology used often is a default divorce, but it's also, I will call it a not agreed divorce, where it's a little more of an arm's length process. A lot of the same things are going to be the same. There's going to have to be a hearing, but there might be some other things that need to occur before then. There might be discovery that goes on before that. There might be mediations, things of that nature. So there's a lot of different things that might occur in this type of case. Obviously, divorces without children are the simplest, I guess you could say, especially if it's an agreed divorce without children, because the primary issue is to grant the divorce and to divide any community property, which most parties are, or a lot of parties are able to agree on that, but if not, the court will apply the law of community property to divide that up. We use Texas Law Help for a lot of our standard forms for things such as divorces. It's an excellent resource, and we could do our jobs without Texas Law Help, but it would be a lot more difficult, and I think it would be a lot more difficult for a lot of the pro se folks if they didn't have this resource. It's an excellent resource. It's available to anybody. You can use it on your home computer. We use it to get our basic forms for petitions for divorce, the divorce decrees, things of that nature, modification paperwork. Obviously, this stuff is also available on our legal databases such as Westlaw or Lexis, but takes a lot more work to utilize their documents. There's a lot more editing that would need to be done. Not saying Texas Law Help is for everybody. A lot of times when lawyers are involved in representing people, they have their own petitions and other legal documents that they're going to use, but it's an excellent resource for pro se folks, and we use it extensively. It's a nonprofit. It's run by lawyers and so forth, and they update their forms on a regular basis. You know, divorce with minor children obviously is a bit more involved. There's a lot more issues going on. You know, there can be a lot more to the entire process, but you know, there's paperwork and stuff that we have for people to do it. You know, the issues that have to be taken care of in a divorce with children, you got to determine, you know, the custody arrangement, the visitation arrangement, the child support, insurance, and so forth. And so there's a lot of issues that involve the children. Yeah. So let's kind of move on from divorce. There can be divorce. One more thing on divorce. Sometimes people, before they get divorced, they separate, but maybe they don't get divorced for a while. So they do have a court order already in place. They came to the court seeking court orders and such to govern child support and custody. So there is paperwork for that as well. If you're a respondent in a divorce, meaning you're the party that did not file the case, you have the same rights as the person who filed the case. The court doesn't look at them any differently. Sometimes the petitioner might kind of drive the bus a little bit more on the, how the case goes, but your rights as to, your children and so forth are not governed by whether you're the petitioner or the respondent. When people are getting divorced and there is a pension involved, the community property law essentially is, the default is that people who are married, things that are earned by either party during the marriage and acquired during the marriage are presumed to be community property, obviously with some exceptions, and then how that then is divided up. And so if I'm earning a pension, say I'm married for 15 years, and during that time I was earning money towards a pension with my employer, then my spouse is very likely to be eligible to receive a portion of that under community property. So an order has to be entered dividing that up, and that's called a qualified domestic relations order. There's paternity suits to determine if someone is the father, and then if they are determined to be the father, the issues of custody and support and so forth come into play. We have paperwork for that. There is termination of parental rights and step-parent adoption. Oftentimes, there is a mother who has children, and she has remarried to a stepfather, and the stepfather wants to become the legal father. And oftentimes, that's something that comes up quite often. And we don't have some fill-in-the-blank forms, but we do have materials that we send to people to assist them in being represented on this. Termination of parental rights can come in other manners. Obviously, the state can seek it when there are neglect or other issues and so forth. So termination of parental rights is not always tied in with adoption, though sometimes it is. Obviously, that's a very serious issue. Adoption is kind of, like I said, one of the positive things that occurs here at the courthouse. And you can do it by yourself. You can represent yourself in that matter. Obviously, if you get an attorney, that would be ideal. But we have the information and forms that we can send to you, and you can review to determine if you want to use them and go forward on your own. Modification. Family law orders say there's a divorce decree with children, and something changes, or one of the parties wants to change it. They can seek to do so. Obviously, pursuant to Chapter 156 of the Family Code, there's certain requirements on, when and what can be changed and under what circumstances they can be changed. And I'm kind of repeating myself a little bit, but one of the main things that does allow you to seek a modification are changed circumstances. At the time of the decree, this factor was in place. That factor has now changed, warranting a modification of the order. And that's some standard paperwork that we have through Texas Law Help, and obviously our other resources have information and forms on that as well. So that's a regular occurrence here. So that's why, you get a divorce and your child's 5 years old, you might be coming back to court for the next 13 years off and on. Unfortunately, it can last a long time. There can be what's called an original suit affecting parent-child relationship. So, say if two people are unmarried and they want to establish a custody and support arrangement regarding their common child, then they can do so. There's other types of reasons for filing an original suit affecting parent-child relationship. If a parent wants to seek custody, or a non-parent wants to seek custody of children. Sometimes grandparents, they want to step in and assist and get custody of children if they think, that situation warrants it. Enforcement. So the court lays down an order, a divorce decree or something like that, and then one of the parties isn't abiding by it. You can seek to have that order enforced. There isn't really standard paperwork for most of that, but we can send you materials from our legal resources to help you do that. There's Visitation Enforcement does have a standard set from Texas Law Help if the visitation is the issue, that say one spouse or ex is denying visitation improperly. But otherwise, enforcement, it can be done in a general sense, or it can be done in a more serious manner by contempt. And we have information and forms on that. Sometimes say the parent who has visitation has a kids, Sunday night comes around, they don't return the kid to the parent that the child normally lives with, and they won't return them. They haven't kidnapped the kid, but they're keeping them improperly. The police generally are not going to get involved unless they have what's called a writ of attachment. So you can seek to have the court order for the return of the child. So that's it's obviously a fairly serious issue, but we have the paperwork and information for that. Annulment, it's a form of dissolution of marriage. We have paperwork for that via Texas Law Help. You've probably heard the term. There's a civil annulment and there's a religious annulment as well. Obviously, what we deal with here is the civil side of it, things that can be handled by the courts. Name changes, that is covered by the family courts. The forms are on Texas Law Help for an adult and for a child. And there's certain little other procedures that have to be done to accomplish that. It's actually more common than you think. It's probably every day we get someone coming in saying they want name change forms. Before I worked here, I didn't know that. I knew people could change their names. I just didn't know it was done so often. Texas Department of Family and Protective Services, they have a means through Chapter 34 of the Family Code where you can designate an adult caregiver for your child temporarily. I know some of the circumstances that happens is, say, if there's a parent that needs to go to rehab and they need to give the other people control of their kid and power over the aspects of that child's life, education, medical care while they're doing that. Or they might be simply going to work out of state for 3 months and kids need to stay here, and the family member, let's say, that they have the kids stay with needs to have the power to take care of those key issues. And so there's paperwork that's available to do that. Guardianship, it's not part of family law, really. It's technically covered by the state's code, but since it's something that's so close to family relationships, say the care of someone who has become mentally infirm, those are covered actually by the probate courts, which are the county courts at law. But I just did want to mention it. We have information and forms regarding that. And there's also stuff on the court's website that you'll see on that link below. So it's an issue that's near and dear to family members, and I did want to mention that. Sometimes attorneys have to get appointed in family law cases at various times, and also obviously in guardianship cases. I said, I sort of talked about continuing jurisdiction. A court, when minor children are involved, are going to have continuing jurisdiction over that issue. Sometimes people move from state to state, and there is the ability to transfer jurisdiction to other courts and so forth. And so we can provide information on that issue as well. Grandparents are figured quite a lot in these issues. Grandparents obviously love their grandchildren and want to be involved in their lives, and sometimes they need to step in and take care of those children. So we have information, about seeking custody, by grandparents or other family members. We also have information just about what are grandparents' rights. Sometimes it's a bit of an issue. Sometimes grandparents feel left out and they want to see their grandchildren, and maybe there's a family issue where they're being prevented from doing so. And so what are grandparents' rights under Texas law for that? So we have information we can provide to people to try and help them navigate those issues. Emergency issues come up sometimes. You need something done today or tomorrow. What are some things, how can emergencies be handled? We have some information on that that we can provide you. So obviously if that's an issue, give us a call or email, or when we reopen, come see us. Obviously, Lone Star Legal Aid is a legal aid organization here in Richmond. They have an office and they can assist on family emergencies as well. I'm going to have to go a little quickly here because unfortunately we're running out of time and there's a lot to cover. While a case is pending, courts can issue temporary orders that govern the behavior and other aspects until the formal final order is issued, such as custody and support. Protective orders kind of ties in with family stuff. Unfortunately, sometimes people need protective orders from family members and people who supposedly loved ones. We have that paperwork here, and we can provide that to you. Appeals, obviously cases can be appealed to the next level of courts, and obviously there's rules and timeframes concerning that. So if you lose, you have a means to try and challenge that. Texas Law Help, like I said, excellent resource that we use quite a bit. Talking about the resources we have here, we just have really multiple things, forms, practice guides, statutes from different publishers. So it's not just one. We have O'Connor's, we have Lexis Publishing, we have things through other things through Westlaw and the State Bar of Texas. So there's more than one resource to gather information and forms. And we have a great law library here as far as the resources we have available for you. And there's many ways it can be delivered to you as well. We have the books, you can make copies, you can have things emailed to you, and email and downloading to thumb drives are free. We've got all kind of stuff. And so this is just a sample of some of the books we have. So like I said, we're here to help. We've got other things. We've got computers, we've got copiers, we've got the fax machines. We got meeting rooms that obviously we can't use at this point given the coronavirus, but we're going to get back up and running fully at some point, and we're going to might have to do some social distancing stuff, of course, but eventually we're going to more reopen. But we're here for you anyway. So please utilize us. Like I said, our phone number is 281-341-3718. We have a public website, llpublic at fortbend.lib.tx.us, and we obviously the email for me as well. So please contact us, and we can give you information about finding an attorney to help to try and find one yourself to either hire or legal assistance and so forth. So I know I had to go a little quickly, and next time I do this, hopefully we have a little more time to do so. And I really appreciate everybody joining, and we'll see you at the law library. Thank you.